Hey kids, thanks for joining me in the garage again. After using it for about 6 months, today I'm going to give you a hands-on review of the Harbor Freight Titanium Unlimited 200 multi-process welder. It's a mouthful. So far I've only used it for MIG welding at this point, so we'll mainly be sticking with that process, but leave a comment down below if you have any experience with this welder, and I'll see you in just a minute. All right, before we get started welding here, I wanted to go over a few of the things that were in the box when I got the welder. Now, obviously, there's a few more things here that I've purchased since I've gotten the welder, and I wanted to go over those first. And so, one of the things is I bought this little Tig Kit that had a few more cups, some smaller cups than what came in the box, as well as a little stubby cup. It also includes some tungstens, different size tungstens, and some tips for those. And so, that's one thing, this comes with a very basic TIG torch, and I don't even think it comes with tungsten, if I remember correctly. Also, I got some 035 contact tips. 035 is the size of wire that I have in the machine now. It comes with some 030 solid wire and some 030 flux cord wire. I went ahead and purchased I think a 10-12 pound spool of 035 wire. That way I just, I don't run out in the middle of doing something. I put together this welding table as well as some brackets and a little table for my bandsaw, as an example of some of the things I've already done with this welder. And so I put about, 2 or 3 hours, I don't know. I'm almost through a complete bottle of, I think this is a 40 cubic foot bottle of argon and carbon dioxide. And so that's one thing, next that I'm going to be looking at is whether or not want to go ahead and go full argon in order to be able to do some TIG welding. So also in the box, of course, you got your ground clamp. That comes with a Tweco 25 size cable connector. Yeah, that's pretty standard from what I understand. And so you could potentially upgrade your ground clamp if you wanted to get something that'll handle a little more amps. Also in the box, you get a regulator. And so this is something that, is pretty standard. It's a little, it's like plastic. It seems to work okay, but at the same time, it's the first welder I own, so I may not know any better as well. And so also, of course, you get a little hose for connecting your gas to your regulator and then to your welder. Also, of course, you've got your MIG torch as well. You've got a stick lead as well, stick holder. And then, of course, a TIG torch. That covers all the 3 different processes that you'd be able to do with this welder. This welder is also multi-voltage, and so they give you a little adapter. The cable that it comes with is a standard 220 volts, 50 amp 220, I believe. And then you can also adapt that down to a 120 volt cable as well. And so that kind of covers everything that's in the box, I believe. Some of the things that you're going to need as well to do any welding, obviously you're going to need a welding helmet. I got the cheapo Chicago Electric welding helmet. This seems to be doing great for me. I may end up upgrading this in the future. I know this one has a pretty limited size as far as viewing size, and so that's something that I may end up doing. Also, you're going to need some welding gloves. I have several different pairs of welding gloves, just so I can kind of get an idea of what each one is capable of. And then you're going to need some welding pliers as well. These serve a couple different purposes for obviously cutting the wire to length. And then also these tips here are kind of angled in order to be able to get it into the tip of the welder and kind of clean it out after welding for a while. You're also going to need various different brushes, and so a lot of people use these kind of brushes here, these ones with the wooden handles. I've been really digging this little red-handled one because it's got a thinner profile, and then you can kind of get into 90-degree angles really easily, or even even more of a steeper angle. That way you can kind of get in there and get the weld area that you're going to be welding on cleaned up. Also, I've got some tip dip, and this is to kind of help keep that tip clean as you're welding. I've used that sparingly at this point, and I just haven't gotten used to dipping my tip in there before I start welding. Also, I got myself a welding jacket. This is just so you can kind of keep the sparks off of your clothes. It also helps to wear a good pair of jeans, or at least a pair of jeans you wouldn't mind burning a hole in. I've got myself a pair of fire-resistant jeans as well. That way they don't burn a hole and then hurt myself. And so I think now what we're going to do is I'll show you how to get this all set up. You open this up in here, like most welders, this has kind of a process chart here. So you can see the different gauges of wire along the left here, and then also the different thicknesses of metal up at the top. And so depending on what thickness of metal, what size wire, what size process, it'll tell you what polarity, and then the settings that you have on the front of the welder here. And so looking at the front of the welder, you've got your wire speed here on the far left. This adjusts the speed of the wire coming out when you're MIG welding. And then also your voltage, which sets the voltage while you're welding. And then the inductance. And so inductance was something I had to kind of look up and figure out. And so basically this kind of controls the viscosity of the welding pool as you're welding along. And so the lower the number, the thicker it is essentially, and the higher the number, the more fluid it is. And so depending on how you're welding, like if you're welding vertically, for instance, you probably want to set this to a lower setting. That way the pool isn't running as fast, it's a little more viscous. And so it's not running down the weld, and you end up with a big blob at the bottom once you're done welding. And so I've had that problem before where I've had that big blob as I'm welding vertically. And so once I turned that down, it was less of an issue. So that kind of goes over the welder and some of the settings. And so getting it set up is fairly easy. What I would suggest you do is just take a look at the manual. I think right now what we're going to do is we're going to go over, we'll take a look at a few welds and see how those operate. All right, we got our metal prepped here. This is just a little shelving bracket. One of the important things to do when you're doing this is to make sure you've kind of cleaned the scale off of the metal before you weld to it. That way you've got a nice clean weld. I've done it on both the bracket and the little brace that goes on there. So you can see on the ends there that I've got that. So it's set up to be nice and clean metal. And so this is 1/8 inch. So on our weld settings, I've got the wire speed set to 180. It recommends 180 with 18 volts, and the inductance anywhere between 5 and 10. I've got the inductance set to a little bit over 5. I've got the wire speed set to 180, and then I've got the voltage set to 17.6. I like to, I've seemed to find it, the voltage is a little bit lower than what it recommends, seems to be about the sweet spot. So let's set up this bracket here. Having some of these little magnets also come in really handy. Now I'm just going to go, since I've got this on my welding table, I'm just going to put the ground clamp right here on the welding table. Depending on how good of a piece of metal here that you have connecting to your table, you might want to consider clamping it to your workpiece. But I found that this works pretty well. All right, I've got a little bit of stick out there on my nozzle, as you can see, about a 1/4 inch, a little more than a 1/4 inch. One of the nice things about this welder is that it actually gives you a little, maybe about a second or so of gas before it starts feeding the wire. And then after you're done off the trigger, it gives you another second or so of gas to help, kind of cover the weld so you don't get any kind of porosity or any problems with corrosion. So we've got everything prepped up here. First thing I'm going to do is get the 2 tacks on either end here, and then we'll weld all the way through. You always kind of want to keep these balls off of the end there. I don't know if you can see that. That just makes it so it doesn't start very well. So now that I've got that tacked in place, I can remove these magnets. What we'll do here is we'll put another tack here and a tack there, and then we'll weld both sides all the way through. All right, so that is tacked in place. Once you've done tacking, I'd always hit it with a wire brush before you do your full welds. You can kind of see there's a little bit of carbon on there, and so you want to get rid of that before you put your actual weld on it. Let's also check to make sure this is square. As you can see, that's nice and square. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to head and weld right there. I think I'll bring the camera in here, and that way get a little closer shot. You can see there it kind of missed a little bit on that, so I'll probably come back, hit that one again. That's a pretty good weld, I think. All right, the next thing let's do is try some thicker 3/16 metal. So as you can see, I got a couple of 3/16 pieces of steel here set up. Just gonna do kind of a, I don't know if that's a fillet weld or a butt weld. I'm still a little new at this, and so I'm not quite sure. One cool tool that I do have is this Fireball Tools Mega Square. This has been a huge help in making sure everything's square as you're welding together. You've got these clamped together. That way, you know, these tend to bend when you're welding them, and so this really kind of keeps them in place, so as they cool, they'll cool at a perfectly 90-degree angle. And so right now for 3/16, we got it set up. The book or the inside panel recommends 260 wire feed and 19.5 volts. Again, put the volts down a little bit, about to 19. It seems like it runs a little hot. So, and then I've got the inductance. I'm going to actually bump it up to about 7. That'll get it a little more liquidy, and I can kind of fill that in a little better. So let's go ahead and give this a shot now. Go ahead and get out a nice clean piece of wire here to start with, and then we'll get this all filled in. I think I'll bring you a little closer here and see if I can't capture some of that on camera. Yeah, that's not a bad looking weld, I think, for a beginner. So I hope you enjoyed that. You know, I've been really happy with this welder. It's pretty much done everything I've wanted it to do. And so in my opinion, I give it 2 thumbs up. You know, this 3/16 inch bar and this 1/8 inch bar, it welds just fine. You know, I've already made a bunch of these brackets that I got my shelves set up with. And then I've, you know, obviously welded this welding table together with it as well. And so, you know, 3/16 is the largest we went today. It goes up to a 1/4 inch on the inside panel, but interestingly enough, that wire speed is at 280 and then 20 volts. And if you know, crank it up that high in order to weld some 1/4 inch, you'll see that you still got more overhead on the knobs. And so it goes up to a 400 on the wire speed and up to 28 volts. And so I imagine it can probably do more than a 1/4 inch, though, you know, the duty cycle on it probably is a lot less. I haven't run into a duty cycle yet on it, and so there's been no overheating issues, at least for what I've done. You know, this tabletop that I welded is 3/8 inch steel, and I welded it to 1/8 inch 2 inch by 2 inch square tube. And I don't know if you can see, but around the edges where I welded it, there's obvious penetration heat marks on the top of this. And so it welded it just fine and penetrated just fine into that 3/8 inch steel. So I think you could probably get away with, you know, limited use for more than a 1/4 inch steel for welding with this welder. So, you know, I hope you learned something today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up. If you're here for the first time, consider subscribing. You can always follow me on Instagram at Weekend Wrench Turner. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.